Welcome to Python by Example. This is session 3. So far, we have covered a few of the core concepts of programming. We have looked at what variables are and how to create and use them. We have looked at the concept of data types. We have looked at input-output statements within the language. We have looked at how to create comments. We have looked at a few operators, namely, we have used the assignment operator, and we spoke about the comparison operators in terms of their functions. We have also started to look at conditional statements, and particularly, we have covered the if statement and the if-else statement. The purpose of this particular session is for us to have a look at the if-else-if construct. And this is an example of what I call the multiple if statement. So going back to what we had before, we spoke about the fact that we had our sequential statements, and this was the default operation of the language. We spoke about the conditional statements, and we broke them down into two categories so far. We have the single if, where we tell the system what to do when the condition is true, but we do not tell the system what to do when the condition is false. We looked at the double if, and in this case, it's the if-else construct. And this allows us to specify what to do when the condition is true, and also what to do when the condition is false. And now we want to have a look at the multiple if. And this allows us to test multiple conditions. And depending on which condition is true, then that will determine the statements that are going to be executed. So let's have a look at the multiple if statement in action. And in order to do that, let's just quickly jump to a programming scenario. So you're designing a digital menu system for a school canteen, and the students will select a meal, and the program should calculate the total cost for that meal, including the 15% GCT. So you have a list of options here. The name of the item and the base price in Jamaican dollars. So we are going to construct this menu based on the concept of the multiple if statement. The first thing that we want to do is we need to get the option. The option will determine what item is being purchased, and also what cost is supposed to be associated with that particular item. So let's get coding. Because we know we're going to need the option, then let's get that straight out the bat. We know that option is going to be a numeric value. So we have our int that will do the conversion. We have our input that will prompt the user to enter an option. So selection here will indicate what option has been selected by the user. But we also need the user to know what items are mapped to each option. So before we accept the option, we want to have some print statement that displays the menu item. So we'll use a series of print statements. So one would be ackee and swordfish. Two would be curry chicken, and three would be stew peas. Three is going to be stew peas. So that's three stew peas. And then four is the veggie wrap, and five is exit. So four, veggie wrap. And five, this is where we exit the program. Now I could have finished writing out the entire program, but that is not the approach that is suggested whenever you are writing your solutions. You want to write small bits of code and you want to test it often as you go along. This enables you to see what is working and to identify very, very quickly which statements you place inside your code which are not working. So we are going to be using that approach as we build out our solutions. So we are going to test this by printing the option that was selected by the user. So it's option equal option. And the purpose of this, as I just mentioned, is just for us to test that we can get an option from the user and display that option on the screen. So let's go over to execute the program. So we are seeing that we have our menu items. And right below our menu item, we have the place where we are going to place our selection. So let's say, for example, we chose option 3 and we hit enter. Then it tells us that the option that we have selected was option 3. We typically want to do this maybe 2 or 3 times just to ensure that we are sampling the range of values. So we know that option 3 has been selected. So let's select option 1 next. So we're going to re-execute. This time we select option 1 and we test to see that option 1 has been selected, which it has. And then we re-execute, and this time we're going to try option 5. And option 5 has been selected. Now that we are sure that our selections have been obtained from the user, the next thing that we want to do is to print out the dish item that was actually purchased. And in order to do that, we're going to make use of the multiple if statement. So if option is equal to 1, remember the double equal sign is what denotes equality in the Python language. So if option is equal to 1, then we want to print ackee and saltfish. Remember, with the if statement, we need to ensure that we tab the items which are linked to the condition. So we simply print ackee and saltfish. And we do another test. This time, if option is equal to 2, then this time we now want to print the curry chicken. Remember, we have to tab the item. If option is equal to 3, then we are going to print stew peas. And as I would have mentioned before, we don't want to write out all the codes. We just want to take our time and build out the solution as we write code and we test in a manner that is repetitive. So we have put in those codes, so let's test those options. So we select 1, that prints the ackee and saltfish. We select 2, and that prints the curry chicken. And we select 3, and that prints the stew peas. So we are doing good so far. So let's finish up. If option is equal to 4, please note that we have placed the colon at the end of all of these if statements. So we are now at the veggie wrap. And finally, we are at the exit. So if option equal to 5, then let's print exit. Once again, we like to test. So we have just added some new options, namely 4 and 5. So let's test those. So we enter 4 for the selection, and we get our veg wrap. And we enter 5 for our selection, and we get the exit. So far, things are looking fine. Note in this case, we are using multiple if statements. Now I'm going to change to another type of multiple if statement. But before I do, I just want to explain how the if statement actually works so that you understand the nuances of what I'm about to do whenever I make the changes. If we have multiple if statements looking like this, then what it means is that each of these if statements is going to be checked to see if it is true. So in the case that the user enters, for example, 4, then what is going to obtain is that the system will check to see if option is equal to 1. That will be false because option is actually equal to 4. It will then check to see if option is equal to 2. That is false because option is equal to 4. It would then check to see if option is equal to 3. That is false because option is equal to 4. It would then check to see if option is equal to 4. Option is indeed equal to 4. Therefore, the print statement that is associated with option 4 is going to be executed. And we are going to see veggie wrap being displayed on the screen. Note that we did not display any print statement for ackee and saltfish. We did not display any print statement for curry chicken. And we did not display any print statement for the stew peas. And the reason why we have not done any of those is because the preceding options or conditions were false. Remember, with the if statement, we execute whenever the condition is true. And if the condition is not true, we ignore those statements. So let's hit enter. And as can be seen by the demonstration here, we have selected veggie wrap. Now, based on what I've just outlined, with the multiple if, you realize that we are checking each of the statements as we go along until we locate a statement that is true. Here's a challenge with this particular approach. If the option is actually 1, meaning we have selected the first option because we want ackee and saltfish, then there's really no need to test option 2, 3, 4, or 5 because we have already obtained the information that we need. What would be better is if there is a way for us to ignore the other selections, given that they are no longer relevant. In other words, if we select option 1, we should print ackee and saltfish, and then we should not have to check any other option because we have found the option that we actually wanted out of the list of available options. If we have the multiple if organized in this manner, then that is not done. We would still have to test every single option, even after we have obtained the option that we actually want. In order to get around that concept, we use a construct known as the if, else if. So I'm simply changing from if, multiple ifs, to a new multiple if that is built around the if, else if command. So how is this actually different? As mentioned before, with the if, else if, we search all the options to see which is true. And at the point that we find an option that is true, we execute and we leave or we ignore the other else if statements which might be present. So just to demonstrate quickly, we're going to execute. Our selection is 1. So this means that we have selected the ackee and the saltfish. So I would expect for us to print what we have selected, and we can therefore ignore all the other stuff which are present. So we can ignore all the other stuff. All of these going down can be ignored. And that is what is going to obtain in this particular scenario. So I'm going to just hit the enter key. We have the ackee and the saltfish being printed. We know that the option was 1. But we have just gotten some efficiencies because we are no longer testing each and every condition. We're simply going through the list until we find a condition that is true. Whenever we find such a condition, we execute, and then we ignore all other conditions which are present in the if-else if. So it's a slight change from what we had before, but in terms of efficiency, it is much, much more efficient, especially if we have a very, very long list. I'm now just going to put a print statement that indicates we have reached the end of the program. And let us re-execute. This time, we are going to choose item 3. We're going to hit enter. We see that we have obtained our stew peas. And note, there's something that we need to get rid of here. We need to get rid of the 3 because we are still printing that 3 option. So let's go ahead and fix that. But point to note, in this case, we would have checked option 1 to see if it's true. It would be false. We would have then checked option 2. That is false. And then we would have checked option 3. Option 3 is true. So we print stew peas, and we would have ignored all the other options because they are no longer relevant. So let's clear. And let us make our modifications. All right, excellent. So we're off to a great start here. We're about halfway there. Let's look back at our problem statement to see what else we need to do to finish it up. Now we have the cost, the base price cost. If it's ackee and sawfish, it's 5, curry chicken 450, stew peas 400, veggie wrap 350. So we need to account for those prices in our solution. So let me create a variable called base price, and let me put a starting value of 0 into that variable. Now, if option is equal to 1, not only do we want to print ackee and sawfish, we want to set the base price. And the base price for ackee and sawfish would be 500. For the curry chicken, which is option 2, the base price is going to be 450. Please note that we are indenting the base price under each of these if statements. For option 3, the base price was 400. And for the veggie wrap, the base price was 350. For option 5, there is no base price because that is telling us that we want to exit the program. So we have just set the base price depending on the various options that have been chosen. And let us test this. And we're going to test it by putting a print statement after we have exited the if-else-if construct. The base price is followed by base price. And once again, we are going to test just to ensure that our program is running as we intend. So let us make our selection. Let us select a veggie wrap. So a veggie wrap base price should be $3.50. And we are seeing indeed that the base price is $3.50 for the veggie wrap. Let's re-execute. This time, let us choose option 1. Option 1 is ackee and saltfish. So the base price should be $500. And we are testing to see if we are getting the $500. And we are indeed getting the $500. The base price is $500. And let us re-execute, and this time let us choose option 5. So we have selected option 5. We are in the exit menu, as we should be. And please note that the base price is 0 because we have made no selection. So it therefore means that the base price of 0 has not changed because choosing option 5 will not update the base price. Now it tells us that we should also calculate the total cost, which is to be paid by the customer. And this total cost includes a 15% GCT. So we now need to account for that in our program. In our previous demonstration, you would have seen that whenever we select an item, we also get the correct base price. So it therefore means that we can now do our calculation for our total. So total is equal to base price plus the base price times 0.15. 0.15 would be the 15%. And we would want to print that total. So let's do a formatted print statement. So the total cost is total. And base price is base price. So we no longer need to have the print statement here on line 35. We had put it there merely for testing purposes, which is something that we will be doing as we build different solutions. And we are just organizing the code so that it's a little bit more readable. So at the top, lines 10 to 14, we are printing our menu option. Line 16, we are obtaining that selection from the user. Line 17, we are initializing the base price to 0. Lines 19 to 31 is where we set up our multiple if statement. And in this case, we are primarily targeting the if, else if structure, which has more efficiencies than just multiple single ifs, as we explained earlier. On line 34, we are calculating the total price based on the base price plus the 15% that is charged on the base price. And in line 35, we are printing the total cost as well as the base price. And on line 37, we are displaying a statement that indicates we are at the end of the program. So it's now time to test all of this to see if it works. So we have our menu. Let us select curry chicken, which is option 2. So it tells us that the base price is 450. And it tells us that the total cost is 517 and 50 cents. Now, because we are dealing with numerical values, in particular real values, we might want to format this a little bit better. So we're going to search for the syntax that tells us how to format to 2 decimal spaces in Python. So I'm just going to go to Google. I'm going to ask the question. So how to format number to 2DP in Python. And it says here that we can use the round function with the number that we want to print to 2 decimal places. And we indicate how many decimal places we want to put that number to. So let us try that inside our code. So the value that we would want to work with is the value here called total. So let's create something called rounded total. And let's say that is equal to round total. And we want 2 decimal places. It means that on line 36, we now need to change total to rounded total. And let's clear and see if that actually works. So we had chosen curry chicken. And when we have a look here, it says that the total cost is 517.5. So once again, even though we have followed the steps and we have made use of the function that we are given, we're not seeing what we anticipate. So let's move on to see if there is another way in which we can approach this. And option 2 here says we can use F strings or formatted strings that we have been using so far. And when we have the number, we simply append the .2f to it. And that should allow it to print to 2 decimal places. So we are going to follow that syntax by placing that at the end of the number. And we are going to see if we achieve what we want to achieve. So we are going to go to the value that we want to display to 2 decimal places, which is rounded total. We put the colon, a dot, 2f. We clear. We are going to re-execute. It's curry chicken. And this time we are getting what we had anticipated. We are getting the 517.50. Now it's up to you to do the calculations to see whether or not the calculations have worked out correctly. Meaning, when we add the 15% of $450 to the 450, do we end up with 517.50? So that's something for you to do. Now, I'm just going to tidy up my code. I am thinking I don't need this rounded stuff. So I'm going to comment it out. I'm going to get rid of it here. So I'm just looking at total. And I'm just going to say I want to print total to the 2 decimal places. So let's clear. Let's re-execute. Let's choose our curry chicken again. And there we go. The total cost is 517.50. Just doing some more tidying up. I want my end of program to be separated from my output. I also want to ensure that there is a new line between my total cost and my selection. So we are going to test that now. So the selection is going to be curry chicken. I note that I have curry chicken being printed too near to my selection. My total cost and the base price seems fine. So I want to go in and make some adjustment to these print statements. So let me put new lines at each of these. And then let me recheck to see what my output looks like. So 2 again for curry chicken. And I'm choosing the same thing over and over for consistency, so I can see when I get the kind of look that I want to get on the screen. All right, so I am seeing here that the curry chicken is where I want it to be, but there is that space that I placed in between the total cost, which I no longer need, so I can get rid of that. I don't need the extra new line. So I want the curry chicken and the total cost to be closer. And I want the end of the program to be on that new line. And I'm just going to put a little symbol so that the end of the program kind of stand out. So let's clear. Let's re-execute. Option 2 for curry chicken. Well, it prints curry chicken, it prints the total cost and the base price, and it tells us that we are at the end of the program. Now, just by looking at it, I think I want to have the symbol before the curry chicken and the total cost. And I want the end of the program to just be right at the start where it was before. So let me grab that and let me put it before the total cost. And let me also put it before each of these menu items. So I'm just pasting. And we are doing this because we are looking for a particular look and feel in terms of our program. Remember, the user interface is going to be important. So we're spending a bit of time now on that, given that we have fleshed out the logic of the program. We also don't need line 35 as demonstrated, so we can get rid of that. All of this is tidying up the code. Let's re-execute option 2. So we are seeing curry chicken and the total cost. I like the way it is indented for us with the special symbol that I've placed in. And I like the fact that the end of the program goes back to the beginning. So I think I like that look. The only other thing now is I need a space between curry chicken and the symbol and between the total cost and the symbol. And I think then I should be fine. So I'm going before the symbol, I'm just putting a space for each of these items. Then I'll do one more print just to see what things look like. And then we will call this a wrap. So it's curry chicken. Output is looking fine. I'm seeing things organized as I want to see them. And so this brings us to the end of this session. We have covered a fair amount of information. And in the next session that we're going to have, I will be just doing some problems. So we'll have some problem scenarios. We will be solving these on the fly, and we will be making use of the various commands that we have been exposed to so far. So that will kind of be a revision session. Additionally, we will try and cover a few of the operators that we have not yet touched on so that you can have a better appreciation and a better feel of what these operators bring to the table. So thank you and stay tuned for our next session.